Isaac Sacolick is a best-selling author of Driving Digital, specializing in digital transformation and agile leadership. He is the chief digital trailblazer at Star CIO, where he leads innovation and strategy across diverse industries. With over 1,000 articles and recognized as a top 100 social CIO, Isaac is a thought leader in AI, DevOps, and business IT collaboration. If AI, DevOps, and business IT mean anything to you, you won't want to miss this one. Isaac, hello and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. That was great.
My pleasure. Isaac, would you, as a starter, would you share a bit with our followers a bit of your personal journey and how you are here today?
Absolutely. My personal journey, I actually got started in my career in AI back in the 90s and became a developer after that. Went on to become a CTO at a very young age. Some of my books are really focused on how to help people who are becoming leaders so quickly in this day and age and get accustomed to the types of things you have to go through on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to drive transformation. So, that's one aspect of my career is just actually starting C-level work very young in my career. The other is I got a front row seat to transformation. I was a CTO in a startup working with newspapers in the 90s, helping them move from print to digital. I then became the CIO at Business Week magazine. I lived through being a CIO in financial services and in construction. Now my company, we work with all sorts of businesses. Star CIO, we work with nonprofits, with manufacturers, just about every type of company. So I've seen transformation from all vantage points. I love technology and I do technology for a living, but I am not a wirehead geek, have the latest and greatest stuff. I'm more of, I like being outside. I like biking. I like hiking. I like kayaking. I like walking my dog. I like spending time with my three children. So, away from all the technology and transformation and all the writing and speaking that I do, I actually spend my time pretty low tech outside of that.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. All right, okay. To start with, Isaac, I'd like to ask you how do you define digital transformation? And in your personal experience, what are the key elements that businesses often overlook when embarking on a journey of digital transformation?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that every business really has to reimagine itself. What is their business model, their customers, their markets going to look like over the next 3, 5, 10-year horizon? And have that conversation frequently. I got really immersed into digital transformation, again, going back to newspapers in the 90s and speaking to them, before there was Google and before there was Facebook, there were other competitors that were coming in and saying, we're going to build a digital business model around news, around subscriptions, around advertising. And if you ever see my keynote, I often lead with a slide that just shows the decline of revenue for newspapers, at least in the United States. And it continues to free fall. So, first of all, transformation is really recognizing the impacts of technology on the business model. It's not that you're trying to get more technology capabilities. That's part of it, but it's that the way you're interfacing with customers, the way you're running your business is going to change significantly. Even when I talk about how the operating model is going to change over time, I'm not just talking about the impact of automation and looking for cost savings and basically doing what we're doing a little bit better. It's really going to change how our organization functions, how we're developing partnerships, what types of processes and practices are more important. We're talking today about agile, about DevOps, about design thinking. This is not just, retail and media. This is financial services and insurance and healthcare that all have to think about how they're operating differently in today. Another key aspect of transformation is really using data and analytics and machine learning and now artificial intelligence to competitive advantages. We have to make decisions faster. We have to move decisions to the edge of our organizations, to the people who are most adept, being able to make them. And all of this, when I talk about changing customer, changing market, changing business model, changing operating model, now we're becoming data and AI driven. That's really having a tremendous impact on our culture and how leaders are showing up and operating. So that's what transformation means to me. And if you take any industry, I mean, the time horizon might be a little bit different, might be harder and faster paced in media. It might be longer in healthcare, but we're all going through this transformation. And I'll tell you the other part of this, Mark, is that what we think transformation is today is going to evolve 2, 4, 5 years from now because the world will change, the economics will change, the technologies will change, and we will always be transforming.
It will always be transforming. Absolutely. Thank you, Zach, for sharing those insights. Now, speaking about your personal experience, you've worked as CTO and today, what would be your advice when you think of it for all those CTOs and CIOs who are leading on digital transformation, especially in the
Yeah.
post-pandemic era? How would you advise them to approach this?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, particularly in the CTO and CIO role, I mean, you're paid to be solution oriented. You're paid to be innovation oriented. You're paid to be execution oriented. And so you have this narrow view sometimes of what transformation is, particularly after the pandemic. When I spoke to CIOs in that 2 year period, transformation was all about hybrid working and enabling low code and no code type of operations to replace emails and collaborations and meetings and spreadsheets because they couldn't do those things anymore when or as effectively when working remotely. So they had this narrow view of digital transformation is we need to enable hybrid working. 2 years before that, if you ask the same question of CIOs and CTOs, it'd say, you know what, our data centers are too expensive. It's too hard of an operating model. Digital transformation is going to help us move to the cloud, and we're going to get the benefits of the cloud. So I think that's a very narrow way of looking at transformation. I think it's looking at it from a tactical, how do I apply technologies to a greater business benefit? And I encourage CTOs and CTOs spend your time to really understand markets and customers and what their expectations are. What does that business model look like when you're doing something completely different than what you're doing today and how you're serving your customers? I tell CIOs and CTOs another aspect of this is imagine doubling the number of leaders in your staff who can run a transformation initiative. That's the number one barrier CIOs and CTOs faces. How many people, how many initiatives can they run at any given time? And whatever that number is, whether they have 100 people and they can do 5 or 1,000 people and they can do 50, it doesn't really matter. We have a limit of capacity, and the business often is asking for 2 to 4 times that amount. So how do I double that? How do I quadruple the number of leaders who can actually run transformation initiatives and actually impact the business and actually run change management efforts and actually plan things in a very, very agile way? And the other part of it is, going back into operations, everything that we're doing with technologies today is mission critical. There's no free pass for most organizations to put out a minimal viable experience only to find out that it breaks or it has security issues, or once you get, 10x the amount of usage, it starts slowing down. So we have tremendous pressure to not only innovate and bring to market capabilities faster, but making sure that they're scale, they're operationally resilient, they're secure. And that should be what is in the forefront of CIOs and CTOs when it comes to transformation today.
Thank you for sharing those insights. Isaac, you've led Agile and DevOps transformations in multiple organizations of different sizes, right? What is the most common misconception that you have seen businesses having when adopting Agile practices?
Yeah, like you said, I've done it in groups of 5 people to groups of close to several thousand people. And, the principles of Agile, principles of Scrum tend to be the same. But when you look at how organizations are operating, they're all very different. Their cultures are different. The types of initiatives are different. And so I remind every CIO and CTO that I talk to is that there's no one way to practice agile. I don't care what frameworks you've spent money on or consulting companies you've worked with. Your objective is to figure out what agile needs to deliver in your organization. What is its operating model? What do we call product owners? What do we call product managers? You might call them something different. Which teams are getting scrum masters and need that level of assistance to get started off? What's the role of a technology leader? So very first and foremost is I tell CIOs and CTOs, discover what your agile way of working and continue to iterate on it and recognize even in your organization, particular larger organizations, what you're doing to do a ground floor innovation oriented program in Agile is going to look very different than if you're using Agile to upgrade your ERP or update your electronic health record system. So there's very different variants around this. I think it's important for CIOs to take the notion that Agile, it really isn't an IT process. And I still get this from a lot of CIOs and CTOs that look at it as, we have our stakeholders over here and we're running Agile over here. And it's usually responsive to the fact that it's really hard to get business leaders to understand Agile. A business leader wants to know what you're delivering and when, and Agile's really good at telling you what you're going to deliver in 2 weeks and maybe what you're delivering in 4 weeks. So there's a mismatch there that CTOs, CIOs have to fill the gap in terms of process. And the most important thing to start out with is recognize that when we talk about a self-organizing team, we're not talking about database developers and QA and DevOps all being on one team. We're talking about having business people participating. If I'm launching something that is customer facing, I better have a marketer on my team or someone in communications on my team. If I'm working on an ERP upgrade, I better have the finance people on my team to be able to do some of the work with me. So number one, Agile is not an IT process. And number two, if you look at the body of literature around Agile, it's very focused on delivery. Right? We sign up for the sprint, we commit to a bunch of stuff, we complete it, and we're doing user stories and we're actually delivering something at the end of every sprint. Agile is not very good at talking about how to fill backlogs, how you're doing planning. And it's really poor at saying, okay, now that we've delivered something, how do we run change management programs so that our end users adopt it, that we get feedback around what's working, how do we make improvements, how do we take in operational enhancements. So when you really want to be an Agile organization, you talk about Agile transformation, I'm talking about planning, delivering, and transforming all within the framework of an Agile program.
Great, great. Isaac, especially in industries like healthcare and financial services, when you talk to people about their being innovative and their innovation, they often tell you, operational realities are that we have legacy systems and we simply cannot be innovative in what we are doing. How do you balance the need for innovation with the operational realities that people complain about?
Well, look, I don't care how small of a startup you have operational realities. And bigger companies, they might be more of them. They might be more complex. They may be a lot of legacy issues that come with running legacy systems for a long period of time. But you can break and unpack this down. Okay. The first is I always look for doing some innovation work on the edges, things that are not tied to mission critical areas, things that don't have necessarily the same level of security or safety or compliance factors. Find some easy areas where the organization can just get used to the art of innovating, the art of asking questions and challenging status quo and using some of the new technologies and running an agile process so they can understand the mechanics of it. I also tell organizations, I have a few videos around this. It's very important if you're going to be doing transforming, pick at least one and probably not many big rocks to move in your transformation program. You may have 10 legacy systems, pick one. Pick one legacy practice to say, you know what? I don't care if it takes 6 months or 6 years. We're going to start unpacking it because it's inhibiting our ability to scale. It's ruining our customer experiences. It's expensive to run. Whatever the factor is, whatever the motivation is, unpack it and say, you know what? Maybe we can't do 10 of them, but we can pick one and put the right resources and find the right partnerships, look for the right technologies to start unpacking that big one. And again, now we've got some smaller initiatives that are teaching us how to innovate without constraints. Now we're taking a big one, unpacking it down and saying, now we can innovate with some constraints. The ones in the middle, I advise organizations do a lot of blue sky planning, right? Even if you don't execute on it, what will this look like? Get people to dream what their future's going to look like, particularly in the age of AI, right? AI is going to be highly disruptive. We don't know if it's going to be really fast like the last 2 years or it's going to slow down in a few years, but find places where you can bring people together and say, what will the patient experience look like when they walk into the ER and we can adopt AI in the ER? Can't do that today. I don't think many ERs are going to go do that. How can we help nurses, handle a situation? What can we use Alexa for? I actually did a brainstorming session with the hospital system. How can we use Alexa only for nurses in these types of rooms so that they become more effective and more efficient? So there's a lot of different ways, but you have to put things in different buckets and say, what, we're going to do a little bit of blue sky. We're going to do a little bit at the edge. We're going to do a couple things that really break down the big boulders. And when you do that over time and you build up that muscle, it doesn't feel that constraining and that inhibiting. Every company has legacy to work through.
Thank you very much for that, Isaac. We at the Swiss Quality, we do recommend actually to our partners, whenever we're talking about software implementation or software development, we recommend agile methodologies.
Mm-hmm.
In your
experience, so do I.
How do you see the relationship between agile and digital transformation evolving over the next 5 or 10 years, especially if you add to this new technologies like, for example, AI running the project or blockchain helping in running the project?
Sure. So let me share why I think Agile is so important in transformation to start with, right? And you think about that early stage initiative, right? We've done a vision statement, and I have a template for that. There's lots of templates for that, but we want to start with an aligned vision around what it is that we're trying to actually accomplish. What does it mean for benefit? What does it mean for customers? What does it mean for operations? What's the meaning for the strategy of the business? Get some notion on paper. Why are we doing this, to start aligning people? And now you start breaking this down and saying, how do we get motion? How do we get some traction around this? And take that big rock. I'm going to go upgrade my ERP system, or I'm going to change health record systems, or I'm going to put in a whole new CRM. I mean, that sounds like a really tough program to go do. But I'm going to ask the question, all right, what do we think we can do in the next couple of weeks? And initially, it might just be, what, we're going to go do a little bit of research. Our objective for the first 2 weeks is go speak to 3 different departments and understand how they're doing something. Or, I've already got 3 CRMs. I'm going to go spend some time and see how they're using them. Right. And that's going to be my sprint. It's not going to deliver code or a dashboard. It's going to deliver some research to say, here's what we've learned over these 2 weeks. So that's why I think it's really important. When I think about going into the future, basic Scrum really hasn't changed very much. The tools have changed quite a bit over the last, the courses and the frameworks have changed. But when I look at what's happening with digital transformation and with Agile and with DevOps and with low-code platforms, one of the things we have to really reconcile is the sprint length, right? Which sort of become the de facto standard. We're doing either 1 or 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, but I'm generally a 2-week sprint person. I don't know about you, Mark, but unless you're doing something real ground floor, I might do that in 1 week. Otherwise, I'm pretty much in 2 weeks. But that was from that notion of, I've got a team, I've got to do coding, I've got to do test automation, I've got to update my pipelines. I got all this stuff to be able to deliver the capability on top of the capability. Now we've got teams that are able to use DevOps to deliver daily, if not even more frequently than that. But we're still talking 2-week sprints. We have teams doing low code and no code. They can actually turn around and update in a matter of hours, but we're still talking 2-week sprints. So I think that's one thing that we have to get through. The other is just, moving away from this notion of if I have more than four teams, I need a framework, and I'm going to adopt a framework. And there's lots of them out there. I'm not singling out any single one of them, but what ends up breaking when you would adopt a framework is you tend to adopt some percentage of it and not really get to the core of everything that they're suggesting. You sort of make up things to fall in the gap, or you say something is too hard. And so ultimately, what I believe is every organization is out there to figure out what agile means in their organization, pull for some best practices, but put things into continuous learning, continuous planning, continuous transformation, right? We're not only just going to push capability out, we're going to change how we're operating in the same sprint. We're going to change what we're planning for the upcoming sprints every single sprint. We're going to engage with end users and customers every single sprint. And we start doing that on a very iterative basis. Then you start feeling like, okay, we can really change how we're operating.
Great, thank you. Isaac, in digital transformation, the role of data is crucial. It's a very, very important one. In your opinion, your experience, how should businesses integrate data-driven decision-making into their culture?
Yeah, so let's roll back. You and I have been doing this for a long time. And if you roll back not even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, the data was in a vault. It was in a database secured in a data center with a reporting team or an analytics team and later a data science team that knew the ins and outs of the data. When there were data quality issues, they knew how to wrangle the data. And if you were in marketing and you were in finance or any other department, you kind of had two choices back then. And in some still today, right? You either went to that data team or the analytics team or the data science team or the IT team, whatever you called it, and you try to get some kind of analysis done for them. You outsourced it to them and you got some work done from them. And the other option was, give me the data, I'm going to put it in a spreadsheet and I'm going to figure out all this stuff out myself, right? And there's a ton of both of those happening still today. What we discovered a decade ago, it's been about a decade where we've seen platforms, and there are multiple ones. There's Tableau, there's Power BI, there's probably a half a dozen others baked into platforms that start bringing that capability of doing analytics to our business users. And it allows them to build dashboards, it allows them to do models, it allows them to do some amount of data prep, in some cases, even doing data discovery work. We're finding that, as we're bringing more people into our organizations, they're more data and technology inclined. They want to do this work themselves. And so when I think about data and analytics as a core competency, remember I said digital transformation needed to be a core competency. Data analytics, AI, machine learning is part of that. I'm talking about shifting left, all those capabilities into our business groups. That's the role of IT, is enable our business people who understand the operations, who have to make decisions on a faster basis, who understand how to read in between the lines where we're missing data or where there's data quality issues. And ultimately, they're paid to make these decisions. They're accountable for them. So help them make those decisions, but bring governance along, right? Let's not make the same mistake we did 10, 20 years ago and just throw tools at them, open up data to them and say, have at it. Because that's how we ended up with thousands of spreadsheets. That's how we ended up with siloed databases with lots of data quality issues, because we just gave them the tools and gave them access, and we didn't actually tell them or explain to them or educate them how to create a data dictionary or their role of a data owner, or how do we secure private data so it's used in the right way by the right people and is prevented from other people to be used. And by the way, what I also see in organizations is the reverse of that. Nobody wants to touch the data because nobody's made some policies about it. So you got this hoard of data that nobody is using, and is actually a liability because obviously if nobody's using it, it's not providing any value. So bring data governance, bring data quality, bring data operations to the table, but enable your business to be self-serving.
Isaac, what's the role of, forgive me, what's the role of AI in transforming traditional IT organizations, all sorts of IT organizations? And how have you seen AI impact the way businesses approach digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I remind folks is that, AI is a driver of transformation, but it is not a transformation for most businesses. Okay. It's another ingredient that we're living through today that's requiring us to go back and say, how are we working with customers? How do we want to serve our customers differently now that there's capability is available? How are we going to use our unstructured data? Um, I can use lots of different tools to replace individual parts of my process with an AI capability. I do a lot of writing. My AI helps me come up with headlines. It helps me come up with social media. It does a lot of work with me around editing, but I'm still doing all the writing. So it's taking a different approach in how I write today. But then when I take a step back, I'm also using AI to do research. I'm also using AI to educate me about what I should be writing about. So now we're changing our operating model a little bit because of AI. So I think the very first thing is to recognize that transformation is an organization capability. It's really about changing your model. It's changing about how you're working with customers and then changing how you're operating inside. And AI is an ingredient around this. Um, Much like mobile started, with basically how do we take something on the web and mobile enable it? AI is doing somewhat of the same thing today, taking what we're doing and making it a little bit more efficient, improving our productivity, democratizing, simplifying a skill set, but it's not replacing it, right? I just wrote a blog post of how I used code generators to replatform my whole blog. It couldn't do it without my help. I had to interpret it. It took several iterations around it. Got some things wrong. When I plugged it in, I got a whole bunch of errors, right? It wasn't self-service AI or self-driving AI code generating. It was steering me in terms of where I should write, how I should write this code. Um, but as this is getting better, I really think just like mobile required us to reconsider the user experience on a mobile device and how we were going to do this differently. And it led to products like Uber and Airbnb, assetless type platforms because they took advantage of that capability. We're going to have a next generation of business models that are AI inside models. And some of them we don't know what they are yet, but it's going to be coming. And so we need to plan for that level of reorganization. We need to plan for what that's going to do for our products and services. We need to retrain a lot of people in our organization to think about how to use tools differently. And that's the role of AI right now. And do a lot of listening because obviously the technology is changing very rapidly.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Isaac. Isaac, your beautiful book that I can see behind you, Driving Digital. So the full title is Driving Digital, the Leader's Guide to Business Transformation Through Technology, correct?
Yes, that's
And
my first book. Yeah.
great. And actually, it's a practical guide for business leaders navigating the complex process of digital transformation, and you emphasize the role of technology in transforming businesses, particularly using agile practices, innovation, data-driven decision making, as I mentioned. And you share some insights from your own experience as a CIO, and you offer some strategies for how to implement digital initiatives for growth, right? In your opinion, what are the three or four or five most important things that I, as a business leader, should be really very careful about when I am about to onboard a digital transformation process?
Wow. That's a great question. Look, I think the very first thing is, you need to look around the room. If you're an executive, CEO, CFO, you're going to need to empower a number of people to start or restart or to continue to evolve your transformation strategy. So I think like every other initiative that executives need to think through is coming up with who those leaders are, what listen to them, right? How is transformation going to impact their business? At the end of Driving Digital, I have a picture of this thing called a digital lens. And if you look at that digital lens, I think it still applies today. It came out in 2017, and it talks about AI and talks about IoT. And it says, look, I'm going to hire digital trailblazers. That's the name of my second book. People who truly understand transformation, people who understand the impact of technology. They're going to look at the business through that lens of a driving digital lens and say, you know what? Um, hospitals have to look at themselves very differently, right? How can they evolve patient experiences in this world of AI and data where Isaac is not necessarily an athlete? Isaac is going to come in as somebody who rides his bike and does his kayaking and does his, he's clearly taking care of himself the best that he can. And he's going to show up. You know what? He's going to be willing to share data with us if he can get more personalized medicine. There isn't a hospital I know of today that does that just yet, or does that as I described, but it's capable. Apple makes that capable today, and there's certainly ways to provide doctors with this level of information. There's a lot of privacy around this. So the first thing I'm thinking of is, number one, make sure you have your leaders, empower them to come back to you and say, here are the strategy and the initiatives around what we're trying to accomplish. Remember, I mentioned a vision statement. What are their visions around this? And don't ask them immediately for what the OKRs or the KPIs or the ROI around this. They simply don't know, right? When you're starting something out this early and say, you know what, we're going to evolve the patient experience, and you come back to me and say, all right, how are we going to take cost out if we do that? Or, is my net promoter score going to improve by X percent if I go and implement this? The simple answer is I don't know. I'm going to come back to you and say, in the first 6 months, here is our objective. I'm going to, again, break this down. And the first 6 months might just be a pilot, and say, you know what? And I don't even know what the pilot is. We're going to spend the first 2 months figuring out what the pilot and choosing one that we can execute in 2 months and using the final 2 months to get some data out of this. And then we'll come back to you. And, I need $10 million to go build this pilot. And then I'm going to come back to you. I'm not going to give you the full budget for this initiative because I don't know. And that's very contrary to how we were operating 5, 6 years ago. That says, Isaac, I'm not going to give you that $10 million until I know what what that ROI is and how long that program is and what those resources are. Talk about, that intersection of agile and how we do budgeting and forecasting. I can't do that. And so that's why I explained to CEOs and CFOs in particular, is like, pick your leaders, give them some empowerment, understand that we're operating a little bit differently, give them some room to learn. And as they learn, then ask for more information about what this means for your business.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this. Isaac, we've met over LinkedIn. How important do you think LinkedIn is for you as a professional and for people who do business like yours?
Here's what I'll say. I think it's incredibly important to be networking, networking in person, networking virtually, finding people to learn from, finding people that inspire you, finding ways to share information, whether it's, I need help with something or I need some guidance around something. Um, LinkedIn is probably if not probably the most powerful professional network out there. And I use other ones. I'm very vocal on Twitter. I share all my information on Twitter. I go to conferences. If you want to see what I'm learning at a conference, just follow my Twitter stream, right? Anything I see interesting, I photo it, I put it up there. You're getting real-time information around that. You want to see what I'm learning about and what's really interesting me and what I'm thinking about, read my blog, drive.starcio.com. I just relaunched it. There's almost 700 posts going all the way back to 2005 around it. Can't keep up with it, sign up to my newsletter around it. But on LinkedIn, I'm also sharing information around it. On LinkedIn, I have a coffee hour every single Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, starcio.com/coffee. next dash event. It redirects to the upcoming event. We're talking this week about how we have to pivot our digital transformation initiatives because the tea leaves, reading the tea leaves around finances and our ability to, get the investments we need going into 2025, not looking so good right now. Right. So maybe I want to go 90, 100 miles per hour, but maybe I can't do that anymore. And I'm not getting the same level of support around it. So we're going to talk about that on Friday. And every single week we talk around different things. So I think LinkedIn's really important. But I think the bigger question here is you as an individual, you got to invest time in your learning, become a lifelong learning. You got to invest time into leadership, and you got to invest time into being able to network and meet more people. And LinkedIn is just one of those places I do that on.
Absolutely.
That's how we met.
Exactly. Isaac, I've seen some companies trying maybe to save money, quote and unquote, by maybe not hiring a consultant to come and help them with something. So they keep looking inside the company for eventually somebody who is ready to actually try to do something about it till they realize it's maybe already too late to save the company. And that's where actually, whenever we're having those discussions, I keep saying, had you contacted us a bit earlier, we would have been far more able to help you. And I'm sure you have seen this many times in your consultancy and your business, right?
We have a lot of rescue projects, and they're not always they're all for different reasons. Mark, the way I would say this is, I know very few companies that can truly run a transformation program in that mindset of everybody's going to be available on premise and to stand up, right? The world's evolved significantly from there. And even in driving digital, chapter 2, Agile, I talk about a co-creation model, right? Where you're partnering with other people who are going to bring a level of expertise and
Absolutely.
join your team. And, sometimes we think of it technically, I need an architect. I need an AWS person. I'm doing some low code. We need to bring an expert on here. And sometimes it's, what? I've got a volume of work I got to do here. I've got 4 people, and maybe for the next 6 months, I need 40 people to do it. So I think, key to every organization's transformation program needs to be strategic about partnering. I think it's very important for organizations to own their programs. This is where I get very different with some of the other consulting companies that are out there who say, we're going to go run the program for you. Okay. And you may not have the expertise to run a program. It's important to recognize that. It's really why there's a lot of failed initiatives, why there's a lot of rescue projects. But I don't want to outsource the management of my project, nor do I want to hand off that project to somebody who has no skill or capability or has never operated at that level. It's kind of setting them up for failure, right? And, while I admire that, what I'm looking for is something of a hybrid where that person can own it, but they're getting some advice and they're getting some coaching along the sides and they're getting some partners to help them with the implementation. They're getting surrounded by the right people that make them successful. And that's what it takes to really run a transformation initiative.
Isaac, do you see that most people have, talking again about LinkedIn, do you see that most people have proper optimized profiles that really show their skills, their competencies?
It's very hard to talk about yourself.
Other people.
There's a good, industry of people who know how to write resumes and know how to write LinkedIn profiles and know how to build web pages out, and communicate. And even those people get outside help when they're doing it about themselves.
Yes.
And so that's, everybody has a LinkedIn profile. Mine's terrible. I haven't updated mine in a while. I'll be the first person.
Maybe we can help you.
I need help around it. I mean,
I
what
really
I'm
mean
doing
it.
now,
We're doing the service. Maybe we can help you improve your profile.
I just updated my blog, and if you go to the blog today, you'll see I wrote one post why and how and what our strategy was. And if you read the post that I posted yesterday, I actually get into the AI that we use to actually help us do this, how to migrate 700 blog posts that are all over the place because 2005 HTML and writing blogs was very different than 2024. So I had the full gamut of HTML and issues to deal with. And like every other thing that we do, export import just doesn't always work. And in my case, it didn't work at all. So look, I think it's very uh, you can't always bring in an expert for everything. You can't always try to do everything at once. My advisors told me to update my blog 2.5 years ago. Well, I just published Digital Trailblazer 2.5 years ago. I had a book to go market. I didn't have a website in time to go update that
Yes.
website. My finances this year weren't as good as they were 2.5 years ago. So I had to be a little bit more judicious in how I was spending money to upgrade the blog. I ended up hiring my son as an intern, and he did a lot of the work with me.
Really?
And I used a lot of Gen AI to help me do a lot of the work. But
Great.
I do think it's important for people to self-reflect and make sure that you're constantly marketing yourself, and that's essentially what the LinkedIn profile is all about.
Yes. Yes. Isaac, it was a wonderful discussion. I really don't find the right words to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. It was fun. Thank you very much for sharing those amazing insights. And probably we will see you again when you have a third book.
Oh, maybe, hopefully before that. I haven't started a third book, but here's what I'll tell you, Mark. I promised you I'd give your audience a discount code.
Yes.
Um, I am still in alpha, maybe beta at this point, launching the Star CIO Digital Trailblazer community. It's an offshoot of my blog, and it's an offshoot of the coffee hour that I do. And essentially, this community is a place to do learning, to do leadership, to get advisory. We have a unique program called Advisory Connect around it. You can get to the community at drive.starcio.com/community. And I'm giving out this coupon code 2024-Q4-CH. That's again 2024-Q4-CH. You'll get a discount on becoming a member. And there's all kinds of mentoring and leadership programs on there. You'll see the list there. I'm adding a new one almost every single week. So if you
Thank
want to
you
do
for that.
learning, you want to do networking, come and join us on the Star CIO Digital Trailblazer community.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the coupon. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Isaac, and we wish you an
Thank you,
excellent
Mark.
day. Thank you. Thank you.